So anyway, today's speaker was supposed to be Noel George, Executive Director of Foundation Beyond Belief, and unfortunately Noel fell ill and couldn't make it. And I say unfortunately, but it's not really unfortunate because we have locally Miss Julia Rigler. If you don't know John and Julia, where's John? Where's he at? There he is. John and Julia have been around the community for a long time, and somehow we still like them. So they must be okay people. So you're the marketing director for Foundation Beyond Belief. So she's going to talk to us a little bit about who they are and what they do and how we can better work with them. And I know one of the issues that confronted our family that really helped us kind of embrace what's going on here at Fellowship of Freethought is when our kids were in high school, when we were trying to pass on that value of community service to them. We were having trouble finding outlets for that. If you're not Christian, where do you go to volunteer, and who do you give money to, and how do you make a decision about who to give money to? And so hopefully Julia can bring some clarity to that, and there'll be an opportunity for us to talk about it and ask questions if you might have them. So Miss Julia Rigler, please.
Hi, everybody. If I don't have this down pat, please forgive me. I did it last night, so I'm not going to be as on point as I normally am with the presentation. But anyway, Foundation Beyond Belief, how many of you guys, raise your hands, have even heard of it? Okay. A lot of you guys have heard of it. That's good. So Foundation Beyond Belief is a secular humanist nonprofit, basically. And there are several different programs that they offer, and I'll go through them and talk about them a little bit. And then at the end, I'll talk about how to vet a charity if you're considering donating or volunteering with a nonprofit, how to go about looking at them and making sure that they are someplace that you really want to give your time and money, and if they are truly secular, because sometimes they kind of hide it, so you have to search. So this might seem a little off topic, but it's not. Most of you guys are familiar with the Salem witch trials and the accusations that were made against women in the, what was it, the 1600s, 1500s, 1600s. Did you know that that still happens? Did you know that women are still accused of being witches and they're killed for it? It's happening now, and it happens in Africa. And this woman right here, her name is Fatima, and she was accused of being a witch. And she escaped her home village with her life, barely. And she has been living in a witch camp for almost 20 years. These are some of the people that Foundation Beyond Belief helps. And I'll get into that more in a bit. So like I said, FBB is a humanist charity. It promotes secular volunteerism and also charitable giving, responsible charitable giving. And we are guided by the principles of secular humanism. So we want to unite the humanist community in volunteering and charitable efforts. We also want to advocate for compassionate action throughout the world. The majority of our programs in terms of volunteering are in the US, but we also have volunteer opportunities abroad as well. And the work with the witch camps in Ghana is one of the ones that are outside the US. So we forward our mission through 4 different programs. We've got a grants program that provides an avenue for humanists to regularly give to highly qualified and vetted charities in 4 different cause areas. We also have volunteering opportunities where we sponsor secular groups in doing service activities in their local communities, and that's through the Beyond Belief Network. And the Fellowship of Freethought does participate in that and has actually been awarded grants from FBB for the work that FOS does. There's also a disaster response component where we give humanists an avenue to donate to qualified and vetted charities in the event of a disaster. So after a hurricane, after a severe earthquake, after enormous cataclysmic events, you can go to FBB and you can donate there, and know that the money is going to go towards a secular charity that's on the ground in that area, and be sure that the money is going to go where they say it's going to go, and it's not going to be to a religious cause or to a group that just popped up overnight that says they're going to help and doesn't actually get most of the money through. You can trust that we've vetted them and it's an organization that we know is going to be doing the right thing. Then we also have the Service Corps, which is the international volunteering program that supports, supports local nonprofits. We are partners with local nonprofits, and specifically the past couple of years, we've been working with the witch camps in Ghana. So the Humanist Grants Program was the first program that FBB started with. FBB has been around for about 7 years now, and that was the initial start. So it's a monthly giving program where you can donate, $5, $100, however much you want to give. And then the money is broken out each quarter and given to beneficiaries that are secular, that have been fully vetted in these 4 different areas. So poverty and health, human rights, education, and the natural world. So the human rights groups, we do LGBT work, we give to groups. There's the Innocence Project of Texas, which is a secular organization of lawyers that worked with people that have been incarcerated unjustly to help pay for their legal fees and to get them out of prison. Education, obviously, the education programs can be in the US or they can be worldwide. All of these can be. It's not specifically based in the US. The organizations that we vet need to meet our criteria, but they don't have to be US based. The natural world, currently the natural world beneficiary that we have is based in South America. Their name is Ecoviva, and they are working to preserve mangrove forests in South America. I've learned a lot about mangroves in the past month. I had no idea how important they were. They're apparently extremely important. They help protect estuaries, they help keep erosion from happening. They are a source of food for communities because of the fish and the aquatic life that lives in them, and they're vital, and they've been dying off. And so this program works to preserve them, and it actually helps helps prevent climate change because of the way that they clean and filter the air and keeping the erosion from occurring and other things. So these groups all these different categories are very different, but we really try hard to find beneficiaries that are making significant impacts in the world. And so the way that we look at that is we want the program to be evidence-based. We want to have data. We want to be able to say, okay, how have you improved year over year? Can you quantify what you're doing? It's not just feel good, it's factual, it's data-based. And as somebody who is a free thinker, you can probably appreciate that. We're very science-minded people. We like data, we like facts. They're also community-based. We want strong community input, and we want local on-site employees. We don't want someone that's going to go into an area as a stranger and pop in, do some stuff, and then leave again. We want it to be local, community-based. We want it to have capacity building. Can it be replicated? Can it be expanded? Is it able to grow? Transparency. We want information to be found easily and released in a timely manner. We don't want to see projects that are ongoing forever and there's no status update. We want to know what's happening and be sure that they're reporting back, because as a donor, you deserve to know where your money's going and how it's being used. So as the grant giver, we owe that to our donors, so we need to have that transparency. We want a vision. We want them to have a clear, concise set of markers that drive the program. We want them to be innovative, forward-thinking, and adaptive. We want financial health. And we do a very thorough review of their finances to ensure that that is actually the case. And then we also want some variety. We want them to meet our goals of balancing organizations through different focuses. So for human rights, we might have an LGBT beneficiary one quarter, and then we might have for the next quarter one that is based in a different area, but it's all in human rights, but we rotate through. So it's not all focused on one specific area in the human rights world. We try to rotate through. So here's an example of a beneficiary. This was SkyTruth. They were the Natural World beneficiary for the previous quarter, for Q2. And they're fascinating. I love SkyTruth. They are based in West Virginia. And what they do is they fly over coastlines and mining facilities and various areas that need to be investigated to check on their impact on the environment. So they have volunteer pilots and volunteer photographers that monitor this stuff. And they also use satellite imagery. So the satellite imagery they get from the European Space Agency. And this is an example. This was an article that was posted recently. Gulf spills, oil spills in the Gulf, they happen regularly. And there is supposed to be self-reporting from the oil companies. And they don't actually report as high as you would expect. Just like if a police officer pulled you over and you were doing 45 and a 40, were you speeding? No, not really, right? You would think it would be a small thing. But in this particular instance, SkyTruth was able to prove that the reporting was actually much, much lower than it should have been. The oil spills were closer to 50 times larger than what had been reported. That's substantial. So they're our watchdog organization. And the information that they have is really, really important. So that's an example of humanist grants. Then another area that we have is the humanist disaster recovery. We use that program to serve as a focal point for humanist response in disasters around the world. We have two components of it. One is to provide financial support to secular organizations working locally to meet the needs of recovering survivors, and that's through HDR Drive. And so, like I mentioned earlier, there'll be a disaster, and then you want a way to give money to help. But you don't necessarily want to give to the American Red Cross or to a different organization. You can give to us, and we will pick a beneficiary on the ground if we're running a drive for that particular event. And then we also have humanist disaster recovery teams. And those are actually teams of volunteers that go after the disaster has occurred and help rebuild. And we just had a deployment that finished in Louisiana last month for rebuilding from the flooding that happened in the Baton Rouge area in Louisiana last year. I don't know if y'all remember that or not, but there was major, major flooding there and millions of dollars worth of damage. So we had teams there helping with that. We've had 2 deployments so far with this program. It's a new program for us. The first one was in South Carolina in 2016, where we helped with rebuilding from homes that were damaged by a hurricane. And then the second one was in Louisiana, where we were doing the same thing, but from flooding, outside of Baton Rouge. Both deployments have volunteers from across the United States. And both times we partnered with local organizations to help them augment their numbers with an existing effort that they were already doing to rebuild homes that were destroyed during flooding. We think it's really important to work with local community-based organizations. We don't want to be coming in as the outsider and trying to reinvent the wheel. The people that are already there and working in the community know the right way to do things. They know who to talk to, they know who to work with, they know the systems that are in place. We come in and augment, we don't try to take over. So the recent deployment in Louisiana that took place at the end of May and the beginning of June donated 650 volunteer hours, which is the equivalent of almost $15,000 to that local community. Russell Glasser and Phil Session of the Atheist Community of Austin joined us on that deployment, and they actually hosted the Atheist Experience episode 21-22 with the coordinator for Humanist Disaster Recovery Teams, Rebecca Vitzman. And they talked about stories about the deployment. They shared pictures. They talked about, the experience, what they learned, how they had interactions with the locals. Some of the volunteers, as is often the case, some of the volunteers from the local organization were church-based groups, and how they had bridging the gap moments, which is when you overcome your differences and you come together regardless of your belief system. And so we feel it's really important to have these teams out there and to have them be vocal about, not in a bad way, but wearing their t-shirts. It says that they're free thinkers or humanists or whatever, because a lot of times, and I don't know how many of you volunteer, but I volunteer in a couple of different places. And quite often when I say that I'm a non-believer, the instant response is, but you're so nice. Well, yes, thank you, I am. But those two are not exclusive. So it is important to be out there and to say, yes, I am giving back. Yes, I'm part of the community. Yes, I want to help. And yes, I'm a non-believer. It's really important for the overall perception of us as a group to get that message out there. And that's one of the ways we do that at FBB, is to do this after a disaster. And if you want to volunteer for any of our deployments, you can sign up on the website and be notified if there's a deployment nearby. Phil and Russell were only there for the weekend. It was a 2-week deployment. They only came for the weekend. They had a great time. Russell learned how to do drywall. He was very proud of himself for that. He talked about it on the show. But it's a great experience. There is a lot of accomplishment and joy that you can feel from giving back. And these people's houses had been completely destroyed and their lives were just on hold. It had been, almost a year, and they were still living in FEMA trailers. And our volunteers and the volunteers with our partner organization were there helping them, trying to get their lives back. So then the other component, like I said earlier, is drive. And the idea of the drive is to bring resources to those in desperate need, and also raise awareness of that need in the humanist community and beyond. It also helps that we're able to give this donation on behalf of a humanist organization, and it gets that message out there that yes, we care. Non-believers care too. It's not just the big churches that can raise money. There's a non-believer group that raises this money as well. So we have a drive that's going currently, and that drive is in response to the hunger crisis in East Africa. And a lot of people don't even know that it's happening. There really hasn't been much coverage of it in the US media. There's so much craziness going on in the US right now. You really can't even keep up with our own problems. So most people don't know, but there are 20 million people on the brink of starvation in East Africa. 20 million. The drought that's happening there is making it worse. And among the countries that have been the hardest hit are Somalia, South Sudan, Ethiopia, and Kenya. South Sudan is one of the world's newest countries. It's just now 6 years old. They really don't have resources. There was a civil war. South Sudan split off from Sudan. They're still fighting there. There's rebels that are still fighting. They have no infrastructure. They have no way to help their people. And these people are starving. The root cause of these widespread disasters differ from region to region. South Sudan is very specifically war. Other areas are drought. But it really doesn't matter. These people are all still suffering. The UN has declared that this is the worst humanitarian crisis the world has faced since it was founded. And like I said, nobody in the US is really talking about it. When I go to post on social media about the drive and remind people that it's still ongoing, I have to go to The Guardian in the UK, their website, to find out updates about what's happening, because we don't cover it here. So if you're interested in helping these people, the URL to give to this particular drive is fbbgive.org. Then the Beyond Belief Network is another program that we have, and that's something that I had mentioned earlier. The FOF participates with the Beyond Belief Network. It's a collective of over 125 humanist, atheist, and other non-believing organizations that take action in their local community through volunteering and charitable fundraising. There are things like homeless giveaways, monthly homeless giveaways that they do in Austin. There's roadside cleanups like what we do here, and a lot of groups across the country do. There are groups that deliver food to the elderly. There are groups that do fundraising for various areas of need. And it is a huge group of people that's collectively donated over 100,000 hours of community service. So the idea of the network is to encourage and assist local and online groups of people that are non-believers to serve their communities. And so the staff assists teams with ideas and tips for how to do service projects, how to plan events, and then find existing opportunities for service in their areas. And then teams can submit reports and talk about their events. You can get recognition, you get posted on the website, you get posted on the Facebook page. You can also get t-shirts, grants, and recognition in newsletters, et cetera, talking about what your local group has done. So the FOF team was Team of the Month, I think, last summer. And has received a grant in the past for the work that they've done for volunteering. So now we circle back to the Humanist Service Corps. Y'all still hanging with me? I know this is kind of dry. Good, excellent. So the Humanist Service Corps is our program in Ghana. It's a volunteer program that we have in Ghana, working to end the local entrenched custom of accusing women of witchcraft and forcibly exiling them into lives of poverty, isolation, and desperation. These women flee their homes at the risk of being lynched. They haven't actually done anything like witchcraft, but they're accused of it. And this is so much a women's rights issue, so much a women's rights issue. 90% of people in Ghana believe in witchcraft, but witch hunting is primarily in the northern region, which is extremely, extremely poor. The drought-prone northern region has poverty and illiteracy rates above 75%. So these people are very superstitious. And there are a bunch of different factors that go into it, but the end result is there are human rights abuses that are very common. And it's quite often elderly women that are blamed for misfortunes in their families or in their villages. They're accused of witchcraft and lynched. So in order to escape, they leave behind their homes, their families, their possessions, and they just run and go to one of these camps. They're called witch camps for victims of these accusations. They're safe there. There's no violence that's going to occur once they're in these camps, but the living conditions are awful. They don't have access to education or health care. A lot of them are unaware of or unable to exercise their legal protections under law, and they usually remain in those camps for the rest of their lives. They escape with no possessions. There's no jobs there. There's no way to recoup everything that they'd have had to give up. And so once they're there, they're trapped in this cycle of poverty and hopelessness. So what we do is we partner with, right now, 2 different local organizations, and we work towards improving the living conditions for these people, as well as other people living in that rural part of the country. We also work to empower women to become effective advocates for an end to the gender-based violence inside and outside the witch camps. We also try to help these women safely reintegrate back into society. They normally can't go back to their home villages, but we work on getting them integrated so they can go back to another village. Maybe it's a cousin or a distant relative, a friend, but somewhere else that they can go where they can get back into society. We also work to provide greater access to healthcare, education, and a way to get income. We also work with empowering youth to become effective human rights advocates. Any of you guys that have kids or that went to school in the last 20 years probably learned about recycling in school. Recycling is very common now, but it didn't used to be. But since schools talk about it and push it with kids as they grow up and become adults, they're used to it, and so they do it. And so by working with the children and getting the children to understand these things are wrong, we're hoping to have a long-term impact in the community in a positive way to put a stop to these accusations. So back to Fatima again. I showed her earlier. She's 86 years old. She's been sleeping on a cement floor in her mud brick home. The only cushion that she has is this little rug, this little tiny rug. She's been there for 16 years. Food, clothing, and a bed. These are the only things that she wants. And she's just like all the others. At the time that this was written, I think she's actually gone home now, but at the time this was written, she was ready to go home, and she had a relative to help her. She had a plot of land that she could go to, but all she needed was a little bit of money to construct a hut, basically, to live in. 750 American dollars is all that she needed, but she couldn't get it. She had no way to raise it. And so she had to stay in the witch camp until the funds were available. This is the kind of thing that FBB does with this program. These are the people that we're helping. And I know it's super depressing on a Sunday morning, but it's important. These things are happening and nobody knows about it. You know, the US has so much wrong with it, but we're so far ahead of so many other places. And it's important to think about that and remember that and think about giving back however you can in whatever area you choose. This is one of them. So one thing about the Humanist Service Corps is it's different than most international volunteering programs. A lot of them, like the Peace Corps, you've probably heard about for years. You didn't really know much about it, but you know the Peace Corps is the one everybody always thinks of. Humanist Service Corps, the principles are very much locally based, just like with the disaster recovery that I talked about. We want the focus to be on the local community. We want to go in and help the people that are already there and that are already working. We want to rely on their expertise. We don't want the spotlight. We want the focus to be on our partner organization and what they're doing. We just want to help them. We want to tell the story responsibly. You will never see pictures of horribly deformed or malnourished or suffering. None of the hunger porn, I guess you could call it, like the Save the Children. Like the Save the Children stuff. We won't do that because it's exploitive. We just won't. We want to tell the story responsibly. We want to help build local capacity. So if that means asking for volunteers to donate laptops and to teach the local people how to use that laptop once we get them, how to teach them to do things better, and how to expand their program is what we're focusing on. We believe in listening and learning first. The volunteers go through an orientation program where they learn about the local culture, they learn about the local language, the politics, the law, everything. At the very beginning, they go through a pretty extensive period where all they're doing is learning about where they're going to be. It's not the attitude that we're coming in to save you. It's we're coming in to partner with you and help you however you need it. And that's a very different attitude than a lot of volunteer-based organizations. We want to promote a feeling of well-being and fulfillment. We want our volunteers to feel like they are making a difference and they are having an impact. We want them to be happy, and we want them to feel like it has been a good year. These people give up an entire year of their lives and go to Africa and live in these villages and help these women. And then we also want to celebrate diversity. We think it's important to have a diverse group of volunteers. They don't necessarily even have to be non-believers. but they need to be open-minded. But we don't discriminate based on any particular criteria. We want a diverse group of volunteers because we think that that helps everybody. So to learn more about FBB or to donate, should you wish, you can visit us online at foundationbeyondbelief.org. If you want to see what's happening with FBB, like our Facebook page, which is Facebook Foundation BB. If you want to follow what's going on with the Humanist Service Corps and follow them on their journey, we just started a new year, so volunteers have just been on the ground since the second week of June. So they're just starting out on their year-long journey. You can like the Facebook page that HSC has, which is Facebook Humanists in Action is the name of the group on there. And you can follow along and see what they're doing and how, the ways that they're helping these women and what they're learning about themselves, because they learn about themselves. You know, talking about Camp Quest being transformative, spending a year in Africa volunteering with people that are so completely different, with such completely different lives from the average American, it is a transformative experience. And we've had some excellent writers that have written about it on our blog, which is also available on the website, and also on our Facebook page. And it's really emotional reading what these people have to say. And it's really interesting. And it certainly makes me want to give back more, reading this type of thing and knowing I could never do that. These people are amazing to be able to give up their lives for an entire year and go and do these things. But it's wonderful, and I'm really proud of being part of an organization that encourages this kind of thing. So do you guys have any questions about FBB in particular? And I'm going to talk about secular giving and how to choose a secular nonprofit next. But if you have any questions about FBB, we can take a quick break and you can ask your questions. Yes, sir.
You said that there was a Dallas group or something where you guys do service around Dallas.
The FOF, this group. Okay. This group has service projects. So if you have questions about that, who should he talk to? There you go. Any other questions? Okay, cool. All right, so if you decide you want to volunteer or you want to donate financially and you want to choose a secular nonprofit, how do you go about it? First, you have to decide how you want to do it. Do you want to volunteer? Do you have that kind of time? Do you want to donate financially? Then you need to decide what you want to support. What's important to you? Do you want to choose animals, which is what I do? I do border collies, the environment, separation of church and state, which is huge right now. A lot of people are donating on that since the election. Then you also need to decide how much support you can provide. And you need to establish boundaries, especially if you're going to be volunteering. You need to know how much time or money you're able to give and try to keep to that amount. Because with volunteering, I can tell you, my husband will chime in, they will suck the life out of you if you don't establish boundaries. And it's because they're in need. These organizations are in need. Volunteers are hard to come by. But you have to be able to say no and to know what you're capable of giving and what you're not. So it's something that helps to think about up front. So another thing that you need to do is visit charity review sites. There are 3 main sources for information on nonprofits. One of them is Charity Navigator, which is a big one, and it only covers really large nonprofits like the American Red Cross. Then we have GuideStar, which covers smaller nonprofits, but it also has the larger ones as well. So that is actually the one that I always use. If I'm vetting a charity for my personal purposes, I use GuideStar. And then there's Great Nonprofits, which is a partner of GuideStar, and it's reviews. So you can go to Great Nonprofits and you can actually see testimonials from donors and from also volunteers. So if you're looking to volunteer with an organization, going to greatnonprofits.org, I think it is, and looking and seeing what other volunteers have to say about the organization can be really helpful for understanding if it's a place that you want to spend your time. Then you can also obviously conduct a Google search and see what's in the news. So, you know, if you didn't know anything about the Salvation Army and you see the little happy bell ringers, you might think it's a perfectly acceptable charity. They're in front of Target, they're in front of Bed Bath & Beyond. What could be wrong with them, right? All you have to do is put Salvation Army in Google and find all kinds of horrible news articles about them and what they believe and the things that they do. So check out whoever you want to look into on Google and see.
Shelters too, like they're like a really sad place. Like I had some like homeless people that like just hopped on like the bus or something. They're talking about how they would never go back to the Salvation Army shelter because like it's really violent there. They don't take care of you. They don't like get started to like burn each other.
Wow,
Yeah, it's really
I
sad.
hadn't even heard that. I just,
Yeah, no, I just talked
yeah,
to people I know on the bus and like they're telling me about it. I was like, what the hell?
wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so do a Google search for news articles. Then the other thing you need to do is investigate their website carefully. And a lot of websites will have a global search option, but if they don't, you can actually use Google to conduct a site search. So I would search, if it was me, for terms like Christian values or beliefs to actually see if they're truly secular. And this, I don't know, can you guys see this? To do a site search on Google, you type in the word site, and then a colon, and then the URL, and then a space, and then the word you're looking for. And so I typed in Foundation Beyond Belief, Sky Truth, which is one of our beneficiaries, and then this gives you, see all these URLs are Foundation Beyond Belief. It's all the different blog posts that we've had about the organization. So that's how you do a site search. And then for volunteering opportunities, there are a few sites you can go to. volnow.org is Volunteers Now, which is North Texas-based volunteering. So it's very specific to us locally, so that's a good place to go. Volunteermatch.org is another one. LinkedIn, believe it or not, has a lot of volunteer opportunities on there. And then, of course, Meetup. So I'm about out of time, but does anybody have any questions?
Can you go back just one second?
Sure. This one? Uh-huh. Anything else? I guess I'm done.